Hey everyone, Johnny here. Don't speak news. News we're not supposed to speak about. And, well, this is news that isn't really being spoken about at all, at least in the West, just over in Tehran and some other Asian newspapers. But here we go. Exclusive. Israel planned false flag operation on U.S. soil. This is dated a couple days ago, June 25th. So, information obtained by the Tehran Times shows that Israel was plotting to carry out an explosion on U.S. soil and subsequently blame Iran, with the apparent aim of instigating a full-scale war between the United States and Iran. And so the plan involved apparently orchestrating a destructive event within the U.S. and then fabricating evidence to implicate Iran. Classic false flag operation, right? Thereby, they would manipulate American public opinion and then prompting military action. Iran uncovered the Israeli plot through information shared by a friendly nation. Upon learning of the potential attack, Iranians sent messages to U.S. officials and prevented the planned explosion from occurring. So this is all allegedly. Okay, I have no other information I can find or dig up on this to provide any details. Like where were they going to orchestrate this attack? Did they have a firm plan? Was it New York City? Was it Washington, D.C.? These are things that I don't have the answers to, at least not yet. This is where some of you guys can come into the picture. If you yourself, when you're, perusing the internet, come across any information that can fill in some of the blanks on this particular story, let me know. The email is over at don'tspeaknews.com. It's don'tspeaknews@protonmail. So just go over here to subscribe, contact Johnny. And then under that tab, when you click on it, here's the email to contact me. And then if you want to subscribe, of course, just type in your email here and click on subscribe. But if you find any information, particularly on this particular story, please send it my way because I'm trying to fill in the blanks on it for you guys, but I'm just not finding anything. This is it. Every other newspaper I've seen it or, website I've seen it posted on has been quoting the Tehran Times. So I don't have a lot more on it. So it's a single source story. I'm letting you know that up front. So take it with a grain of salt, I guess is what I'm trying to tell you. And then we have this from Laura Loomer. She says that there will be another 9/11 in New York City and that this candidate for mayor, this Zohran Mamdani, will be to blame. Laura Loomer, who's a major Trump supporter, says she's expecting another American tragedy soon. So that goes along with what was being planned, according to Iran, that Israel was planning it, just like they did 9/11, right? So it really wouldn't surprise me. Remember, on 9/11, they arrested 5 dancing Israelis, not Saudis, not Afghanis, but Israelis. And then when they were released, they went back to Israel and they talked about the plot or the whole thing on Israeli television. But since they were speaking it in Hebrew, nobody in America paid attention and they didn't want us to. So, but they admitted what they were doing. They were there to film the event. Well, how did they know it was going to happen? You see what I'm saying? So the same thing or something similar could have been planned by Israel, but apparently the Iranians warned us through a neutral country, and then we prevented the plot from happening. That's what the Tehran Times is saying, what the Iranian intelligence has been feeding them, apparently. Then if we scroll up here, a couple other stories I was going to report on yesterday, but I just didn't get the time. But new peace agreements are allegedly coming out. Daniel 9:27 covenant type peace agreements. So Abraham Accords, think of that. That's what they're talking about expanding here. So immediately after the American attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, there was a quadruple phone call between U.S. President Trump, Secretary of State Rubio, and Prime Minister Netanyahu and Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu intend to quickly break into new peace agreements with Arab countries as part of the expansion of the Abraham Accords. So the following principles were agreed upon in general lines. The war in Gaza will end in 2 weeks, they say. The termination conditions will include the entry of 4 Arab countries, including Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, that will manage the Gaza Strip in place of the murderous Hamas terror organization. What is left of the Hamas leadership will be exiled to other countries, and of course the hostages will be released, they say. Several countries around the world are expected to absorb many residents of Gaza who wish to immigrate. or are forced to immigrate. It might be another way to put it. Israel will express its willingness to resolve the conflict with the Palestinians in the future under the concept of two states. And this is conditional on reforms in the Palestinian Authority. The United States will then recognize the application of some Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. So, yeah, as far as Israel will express its willingness to resolve the conflict with the Palestinians in the future, under the concept of two states, that'll never happen. That'll never happen. So many rabbis, and Netanyahu himself is on record saying they don't want that to happen. So they'll talk about it, they'll put it on paper, but it won't be worth the paper it's written on. So, but that's what they have planned anyway. And like it says here, this is from Fox News. Trump's crown jewel, Abraham Accords, may expand to normalize ties between Israel and other nations. And they've even talked about Iran becoming a part of the Accords. So Special Envoy Steve Witkoff hints at pretty big announcements, while experts point to Syria and Lebanon as likely candidates. So we'll have to see, but yeah, we'll have to see. It's like I said, and like the Bible says, when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes. So as they keep talking about peace and safety, just as Trump was right before the Israeli attacks, right? Talking about peace and safety and negotiating a deal with Iran, all this stuff, telling Israel to stand down. Netanyahu was going on vacation. I mean, that was all deception. Peace and security, and then boom, sudden destruction. So they say one thing and do another, is what's happening here. As usual. As usual. But you have to wonder if what Laura Loomer says isn't coming to pass maybe within the next week. On or before July 4th is what a lot of people are saying, because they had this exercise back in April of 2024, the U.S. government did, that basically the scenario was a biochemical terror attack. So, biological weapons were released essentially, and 280,000 people in this scenario died, and 400,000 were infected, and lots of farm animals and so on. So that's what they were envisioning. And they said it would happen in July of 2025, July 4th to be exact. That's when they predicted in 2024 when this attack would happen. Of course, it was an exercise, completely fictional, but we all know how those things can turn out. Not always. Well, in every case, pretty much, it's come out, an exercise has turned into reality, like 9/11 did. But anyway, just keep your eyes open, no fear. God does not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So remember that before you get fearful. So, where should we go next? Well, let's go to this since we're on the subject of Iran, Israel, all that. From vaccineimpact.com. Trump desperately trying to change the narrative on Iran, CIA intervenes to control Mockingbird U.S. media. So here we go. The Abraham Alliance is what they're going to call it now. It's time for a new Middle East. AbrahamShield.org is where you can go to look at this propaganda. But it's a coalition for regional security, they're saying. All nonsense. President Donald Trump called on CNN to fire the lead reporter of the exclusive article published earlier this week that revealed an alleged leaked Pentagon study stating that Iran's nuclear sites were not completely destroyed. So he was calling for this Natasha Bertrand to be fired from CNN for simply reporting what she was being presented, that they didn't get all the nukes. They did not get all the uranium. They don't even know where it is, according to Lindsey Graham. And saw a quick video with him being interviewed about that yesterday. So she says that the story is attempting to destroy our Patriot pilots by making them look bad, when in fact they did a great job and hit pay dirt. Total obliteration. Well, now we're supposed to lie to protect people's feelings, I guess. Come on, man. But of course, his father's the father of lies, so that's what he does, is lie, nonstop. But he calls for her to be fired because he doesn't like her reporting it. In this case, they were reporting what the truth was and still is. So here it is. Early U.S. intel assessment suggests strikes in Iran did not destroy nuclear sites. The U.S. military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program, and likely only set it back by months. And that's what they've been saying the whole time before they ever attacked, that's the best they could do, even with bunker busters, because they were too deep inside the mountains. So you know what they did? they collapsed the entrances to it so that the Iranians couldn't access it. And if they could, it's going to be a lot of work to get to it. But the Iranians had already been relocating all the centrifuges and the uranium beginning last March, this past March. So they've been relocating stuff for months already. So this assessment, which has not been previously reported, was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon's intelligence arm. It is based on a battle damage assessment conducted by U.S. Central Command in the aftermath of the U.S. strikes. The analysis of the damage to the sites and the impact of the strikes on Iran's nuclear ambitions is ongoing and could change as more intelligence becomes available. But the early findings are at odds with President Trump's repeated claims that the strikes completely and totally obliterated Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth also said on Sunday that Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. So they're gaslighting everybody. And then they blame the reporter for stating what the early assessments were. It's not their fault. It's not her fault that that's what was getting told to her. Now they want a criminal investigation of whoever told her that at the Pentagon. I mean, it's ridiculous. But CNN publicly supported their reporter. They said that we stand 100% behind Natasha Bertrand's journalism and specifically her and her colleagues' reporting of the early intelligence assessment of the U.S. attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. CNN's reporting made clear that this was an initial finding that could change and with additional intelligence. We have extensively covered President Trump's own deep skepticism about it. However, we don't believe it's reasonable to criticize CNN reporters for accurately reporting the existence of the assessment and accurately characterizing its findings, which are in the public interest. Indeed. The heck with what they want, how much they cry. You have to report what's there. However, the next day, the CIA came out with their own analysis, and the same three reporters at CNN who published the Pentagon leak story wrote this one as well. But Natasha Bertrand was listed as the third reporter, not the lead reporter, as she was on the first one. So they say, the CIA says it has evidence that Iran's nuclear program was severely damaged. And so I actually learned about the Natasha Bertrand controversy and Trump's desire to have CNN fire her from the Iranian press. Like right here. Trump wants CNN reporter fired like a dog for debunking Iran strike claims. Since this is such an obvious violation of the freedom of press that is enshrined in the First Amendment, I was curious to see how the U.S. corporate media was reporting on this. It was not in the headline news for Google News, so I did a search for Natasha Bertrand. And the first 26 results all had the same article and the same headline as the new CNN article about the CIA claims, but from many other news sites making it look like this was the main story. So they just switched to Google search results on everybody. So now everything you come upon when you do a search for this says that Iran's nuclear program was severely damaged. So this is a good time to remind our readers about Operation Mockingbird. The U.S. mass media, through TV, started in the late 40s after World War II, about the same time that military intelligence was spun off into a new organization, the CIA. Wikipedia has a decent page about Operation Mockingbird, and we've covered it here in Health Impact News over the years. So here's a couple others that you can read on controlled corporate media. And here's a video you can watch where they're all talking about the same story last Christmas. So this is what the late legendary Walter Cronkite wrote in the introduction to the 1996 book Censored, The News That Didn't Make the News and Why. He said a handful of us determine what will be on the evening news broadcasts, or for that matter, in the New York Times or Washington Post or Wall Street Journal. Indeed, it's a handful of us with this awesome power, a strongly editorial power. So then he went on to say, we must decide which news items out of hundreds available we are going to expose that day. And those news stories available to us already have been culled and recalled by persons far outside of our control. So they're presented with X amount of approved stories that they can choose from, and that's what they have to choose from. They're not allowed to go outside of those parameters. Anyone who does gets fired and blackballed. So we see this CIA Mockingbird media in full force during COVID, controlling the narrative and shutting down everyone else who who disagreed. So there's that new billboard I saw instantly appear in Tel Aviv, right here, advertising this AbrahamShield.org and this Abraham Alliance, which used to be called the Abraham Accords. So a new billboard appeared almost immediately after the current ceasefire between Israel and Iran and Tel Aviv. I don't know how long it takes to create and mount a billboard like this, but the fact that this happened almost immediately after the ceasefire suggests the bombing in Iran's nuclear sites is mostly just symbolic to provide a way for the U.S. and Israel to save face. Realizing that Israel had to end the war and society was rapidly falling apart in Israel, this was obviously Plan B, which was for Trump to try and make a deal with other Middle Eastern countries with Trump's Abraham Accords. So here's how the Cradle reported this story today on their Telegram channel. The Tel Aviv billboard reveals Israeli push to normalize ties with Syria and Lebanon. So this is a new billboard spotted in Tel Aviv, and it features Netanyahu, Trump, and several Arab leaders, including Syria's Ahmad al-Shara and Lebanon's Joseph Aoun, under the slogan, "The Abraham Alliance, it's time for a new Middle East." So I'll let you read the rest of that on your own. But summarizing it here, it says, the billboard campaign coincides with rising domestic pressure on Netanyahu as families of captives in Gaza and opposition leaders renewed demands for accountability just hours after the ceasefire with Iran. Most of the figures shown in that photo including Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman, who's flanked on Trump's right with Netanyahu on his left, are not part of the Abraham Accords, because MBS has emphatically stated in the past he could not become part of this agreement without the establishment of a Palestinian state first, because then he would be stoned to death, in his own words. And he probably would be. His people would revolt. And they're on the verge of that all the time anyway. So on this recent visit to Saudi Arabia, along with Trump and many Silicon Valley billionaires, MBS made it clear that any talk about Israel and Palestine was off limits as a condition to inviting them to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And they really didn't talk about it. So the original members who joined the Accords during Trump's first administration were the U.S., Israel, Bahrain, and the UAE. Sudan and Morocco also agreed to normalize relations with Israel, although Sudan's agreement remains unratified as of 2024. And while Trump said yesterday they're going to have talks with Iran very soon, Iran has publicly denied that as of today. And I've seen this on Telegram as well. Iran denies a plan to meet the U.S. next week, says U.S.-Israeli nuclear site attacks shape future diplomacy. So their foreign minister denied claims of a planned meeting with the U.S. next week, contradicting statements by President Trump. Argachi said Tehran had no current intention to meet Washington and is still evaluating whether future talks serve Iran's interests. Well, I highly doubt they're going to be talking much, at least not about peace. Even the White House press secretary admitted today that nothing's scheduled as of yet. So China, well, they pressured the U.S. to lift sanctions on Iran so they could ship oil to China. So this is huge news. The other huge news that was revealed today, unintentionally I'm sure, was in an interview with Special Envoy for Peace Mission Steve Witkoff on CNBC. He actually admitted that the U.S. lifted some sanctions on Iran on the same day as the ceasefire. Imagine that. Allowing Iran to ship oil to China through the Strait of Hormuz. This shows clearly that China has been involved in this throughout, making sure the Strait of Hormuz was not shut down. Yes, and in fact, I reported that when it was happening, that the U.S. had been begging China essentially to talk to Iran about keeping the straits open. And they never did completely shut them down, even though some ships were turned away at first. But then all of a sudden it changed and you had to wonder why. Well, here's why. China pressured the U.S. to lift sanctions on Iran so they could ship oil to China and make some money and not worry about, their ships getting seized, their tankers being seized. And so for China's help in exchange, the U.S. had to give a little too. So let's skip the first several minutes in this interview, it says here. And I have watched it, and I suggest that too, where they spread propaganda of the U.S. taking out Iran's nuclear program and how they believe that Iran will become part of the Abraham Accords now. That's the propaganda. And start at the 6:45 mark, where he admits that the U.S. lifted some sanctions on Iran already, and then how he tried to spin it. The U.S. narrative that's being spun right now is pure propaganda, trying to hide the fact that the Israelis and the U.S. were totally defeated in obtaining their objectives by bombing Iran, which was regime change, so they could control this area. Yes, it absolutely failed. And the Iranians were galvanized more towards the government than ever. So they had the opposite effect of what they wanted. Even though Israel was hacking into Iranian television and, spewing their propaganda out. So Trump demands to end an end to be Prime Minister Netanyahu's graft trial. He says that the U.S. saved Israel, and now it's going to save Bibi. And so I'll let you read those articles on your own. But the point I wanted to get across was all the stuff going on behind the scenes, like China getting the U.S. to lift sanctions on Iran so they could ship their oil to China was one of them. That was a huge deal to get all this done, to get the ceasefire to happen because Israel was getting their clock cleaned. And they've heavily censored any photographs and drone footage, video footage coming out of, Haifa, Tel Aviv, and other areas that Iran cleaned them up on. Their air defenses had pretty much failed, and Israel was having to pick and choose which ones they were going to try and shoot down. So that was the reason they had to come to a ceasefire. It was more Israel's choice than the U.S.'s choice because they didn't have any other choice to make. So the playbook went by plan B, apparently. Wow, guys, there's so much going on. So much going on. And I could report on more stuff this morning, but I'm going to wrap this video up real quick because it's just getting to be too long. We'll talk about Trump and the end of times and what the Chabad in Israel have planned for the world in a different video. We'll come back to that. In the meantime, understand that don'tspeaknews.com is home base for all that we do. We're approaching the level of 3,000 posts now since the end of 2018 when the website came up. Speaking of which, I'm putting up a fundraiser today. We need 300 and almost $30 to renew the website for a year. That's what we have left to raise, I should say. Thanks to you, all of you who have supported us this month. The timing has been absolutely perfect to keep the lights on, to keep the phones going. I mean, landline and my personal mobile, and to keep the internet turned on. All those things that we need in order to be able to broadcast. So thank you very, very much for the support you've given this month. Like I say many times, without you, we wouldn't be able to stick around. If you want to subscribe to the website, this box is at the bottom of every article. You'll get this as a pop-up once while you're reading an article, and that's it. It gives you the opportunity to subscribe easily if you wish to. Type in your email here, click on subscribe, and you're in. So for channel support, like I said, I will have a fundraiser up for the website renewal here today, but there are different ways you can support underneath that tab as well. All the links are right here. And if you want to find us around the interwebs, Rumble, BitChute, and Telegram, and YouTube, that link, all those links are right under here. Just click on that tab, and then YouTube, Telegram, Don't Speak Health News on Substack, BitChute, Rumble, all of them are right there. And that'll be it for now. I'll be keeping my eyes on all this as usual, guys, but wow, be ready, prayed up, and prepped up at all times. God bless, take care. Johnny Storm, Don't Speak News.